Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of the season 2, Backtracking season 2 finale. I'm at a loss for words at the moment because I do have a couple of little things to get out of the way that I want to say first before getting on with the main thing. So, yeah, first of all, if you hear this really weird light-pitched whirring sound in my laptop, don't worry about that because it happened like a couple of weeks ago and soon died down, and it's just resurfacing again. I am going to get it looked at by the end of the month, so hopefully it's nothing too serious, but if you do hear that throughout this video, I apologise. And another thing, rest in peace to a few days ago, and that was Martin Landau, an actor who voiced the character in Nine, which is the only movie of his I think I've seen. Chester Bennington, who was the lead singer of my favourite band when I was a kid. I had Linkin Park hoodie that I never really took off. I just happened to grow out of it, which is a shame. I loved Linkin Park so much. Even if their album this year wasn't great, but they were still an amazing band. And finally today, Deborah Watling, best known for playing, I think it's Watling. I hope I said that right. Just looking at this real quick. Watling, yeah. Who was a companion of Doctor Who. She's the second ever companion, I believe. And she died of cancer. So, yeah, it's kind of been a crappy few days in that regard. So rest in peace to all three of those. Even though I really only, properly cared, I guess you could say, about one of them, but still sucks anyway. So we're gonna keep the episode going now. Sorry for delaying this. I just had to get that out of the way. So with that out of the way, let's keep things rolling now as we reach Meatloaf's fifth album, Bad Attitude. Released initially in 1984 in Europe before being re-released the following year in the USA, there is a fair few changes to record label and producers. In the UK, the record label was Arista and the producer was Alan Shacklock, and for the US release, the label was RCA and the producers were Meatloaf himself, Paul Jacobs, and Reinhold Mack, aka just Mack. There's also a slight difference in the track listing for both albums, with track 7 and 9 on the UK release being Cheating, Inner Dreams, and Sailor to a Siren respectively, and in the US they were done flip reversed, and that's really the only difference between the two releases. As for myself, I listened to the UK release for this episode, not out of national pride or anything, as it's hard to be proud of a nation that's very pro-Brexit at the moment, but just because that was the version I happened to stumble across when I was doing the research for this episode. In terms of track, this album only has 9, making it one track shorter than Midnight the Lost and Found, yet this album was longer than that one by about 4 minutes. It's also Meat Feast Pizza's first album to not be a two-sided affair, which I'm going to chalk up to the technological advancements being made at that time. Like with Midnight, there are a lot of songwriters for this album, with Loaf not actually taking part this time. The main writers are Sarah Durkee and Paul Jacobs, and a dude named John Poe helped out a bit too. They only account for 7 out of the album's songs though, the last 2 are credited to Jim Steinman because those songs, being Now We're Fast and Surf's Up, were both recorded previously. I don't really know when or how previously, but there you go. According to the autobiography of the man himself, Meat approached Steinman and Hopster again to write the entire album, but Loaf has a bad case of impatience as new songs took too long, so he hired the other writers that I mentioned instead. It's safe to assume that the 2 Steinman tracks written were recorded for the album anyway before Meatloaf got sick of waiting for new material from Steinman. There are also 3 guest appearances, with Roger Daltrey appearing on the intro title track, Claire Torrey singing along on the song Modern Girl, and Z Carling popping up on the song Jumping the Gun. In terms of sound, it is a lot more rock-focused, with the only non-traditional rock instruments being a piano, a keyboard, and a saxophone. There are more guitar solos, and it's got a much faster pace to it, though, which I really do enjoy. Standout songs include the title track, Nowhere Fast, Don't Leave Your Mark on Me, and my favourite, Modern Girl. While Bad Attitude lacks in concept, it makes up for in another great performance from Loaf and some good production and guitar work, so I can recommend it ultimately. It's kind of the Dark Horse album in a way. Next up is his 6th album, Blind Before I Stop. Released in 1986 for Arista again and through Atlantic in the US and Canada and produced by Frank Farian, this album does unfortunately suffer from another case of the record company rushing meaty man meats. They had asked him to put out 2 more albums by the end of the 80s, which were this and Bad Attitude, along with a live album titled Live at Wembley, which I won't be covering because I don't do live albums. Anyway, due to Arista rushing meat again, he wasn't able to get Steinman to co-write songs with him, which is a shame because he did want to write songs with him again, but contractual obligations were a major bitch sometimes, as it turns out. However, despite not having Simon to help, this album is the first showcasing of Dick Wagner working with Meet My Loaf. Sure, it's only on the album's first track in Execution Day, but it's really easy to hear Wagner's influence. As a dude who kind of started off listening to the Wagner Meatloaf combo, it's easy to hear the different songwriting influences between Wagner and Steinman. They both have their own style in terms of rock opera, I'd say, and I can't fully describe how different they sound, but it's definitely worth a shot to listen for yourself, I feel. In terms of the overall sound, Blame Before I Stop is similar to Bad Attitude in that it has more of a rock influence, aka heavier riffs, harder to drumming and more guitar solos, but it also has a lot more unique elements that weren't there on Bad Attitude, and it makes for a very balanced and polished sounding album without too much interference from production. The album does also feature duets again, with John Parr providing co-lead vocals for the song Rock and Roll Mercenaries and Amy Goff, that's G-O-F-F by the way, singing on the song Man and a Woman. Even back in the late 80s, they knew that there were only two genders. In terms of instrumentals, it's pretty much the same as on Bad Attitude: guitars, bass, drums, pianos, keyboards, programming, and a saxophone. That many. But the most interesting addition on this album is the Jackson Choir, and no, not that one. I don't even think the Jacksons were a choir by the mid-80s, and NJ was probably doing his own thing by that point. Sorry, that was a really weird tangent. So, yeah, Blame Before I Stop is essentially Bad Attitude 2.0, and it's the right step forward, musically at least. It still has a kind of boring cover of Meatloaf just stood there. Yeah, at least Bad Attitude had a drawing of Badass Bike Chick on said bike, but that's a small growth to have with what is a surprisingly good album besides that. Standout songs include the title track, Rock and Roll Mercenaries, Masculine, Man and a Woman, and maybe my favourite in Execution Day. Blame Before I Stop is essentially a natural progression forward despite the time constraints put on Meatloaf by the record company, but I can't recommend it despite all that. It's really good. We then move on to his seventh album, Bat Out of Hell 2, Back Into Hell. Released in 1993, there be some changes. First of all, it was released through MCA Records in North America and through Virgin for international releases, but perhaps most notably is Jim Steinman producing the album with Dick Wagner writing the songs. That is right, this is the first fully acknowledged time, in Meatloaf's history at least, where Wagnerian rock is a thing, and it sounds awesome. It's also where I heard my first Meatloaf song in what is the quintessential Meatloaf song, I Would Do Anything for Love, but I won't do that. Featuring Lorraine Crosby, who's credited as Mrs. Laird on the song, being 12 minutes long and the intro track to the album, it sets things up really well for the rest of the album, really. Much like the first Bad Out of Hell and Dead Ringer after that, Bat 2 is sort of concept album on its own. It just feels overall more operatic and theatrical, and it has this element that's been kind of missing from previous Meatloaf albums. Now, it's difficult to say exactly what that feeling is, but if I had to take a swing at it, I guess it's just this feeling of relief. Changing record labels, being able to reunite with Steinman, and hiring Dick Wagner as the main songwriter all help massively with this album, and you can just hear the smile on Loaf's face to be with a label that actually lets him do his own thing for a change. The album is also his second longest at 75 minutes and 38 seconds, and as with the first Pet album, there are things to go through, a lot of them, but I already covered those during part 1 of this finale when I talked about Dead Ringer, Meatloaf lost his voice, and Jim began fighting, yada yada yada, and so on and so forth. Whilst it doesn't follow streamlined concepts like Bat 1 and Dead Ringer did, it mostly focuses more on telling little stories that are somewhat interlinked with each other through the album's songs and sound. The sound itself is your usual Meatloaf fare, but with more elements of choir, backing vocals, and even some bagpipes. As for the songs, there are 11 tracks in total, with the shortest being The Closure in Lost Boys and Golden Girls, which clocks in at 4 minutes and 29 seconds. And yes, I know that there are two songs that are both over 2 minutes 40, but Back Into Hell is an instrumental track, and Wasted Youth is a monologue by Steinman as a prelude to Everything Louder Than Everything Else. If that last song title sounds familiar, that's because it's the name of a 1998 live album by Motorhead with the name slightly changed to Everything Louder Than Everyone Else. Nice little tribute reference there, I really like that. Oh, and also the cover art for Bat 2 is just really, really cool to look at. Standout songs are I Would Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That, Everything Louder Than Everything Else, Good Girls Go to Heaven, Bad Girls Go Everywhere, It Just Won't Quit, and my favourite in Life is Lemon, I Want My Money Back. I messed that up a little bit, I'm sorry. Combining storytelling with an operatic flourish and the talents of Jim Steinman and Dick Wagner working together, Meatloaf knocks it out of the park again with a great performance and a flair for the dramatic. I can easily recommend this one with very little to no trouble. Next is his 8th album, Welcome To The Neighbourhood. Released in 1995 through the same countries via the same record labels, there is a change in producers this time. Jim Simon doesn't help behind the booth this time, and in his place are Meatloaf himself, Stephen Van Zandt, Ron Neverson, and Sammy Hagar. Yes, him. Though Simon didn't produce, he did write two of the album's songs in Original Sin and Left in the Dark, so he wasn't completely left out of the proceedings. The album itself is seen as a concept album as it details a relationship going throughout the years, even to the point of the song titles themselves representing different points and events in a relationship, which I know all about because I get all the girls. There are even some guest singers to help along with this too. Susan Wood performs the song 45 Seconds of Ecstasy completely on her own, and despite the song being called extra over a minute long. Sammy Hagar sings with Loaf on the song Amnesty is Granted, but perhaps the most prominent one is Patty Russo, who helps Loafy on the songs I'd Love You and That's the Truth. And If This Is the Last Kiss, Let's Make It Last All Night. It feels like the guest stars are actually there to help the album along and to help tell the main story, and I really like that. Another thing linking the story is the album's artwork. The entirety of the CD's booklet is much of covers from 1950s detective novels, and whilst that part really is just circumstantial at best, it is nice to have something like that be consistent on a concept album. Now, it is known that most album artwork has a tie into the main concept of an album and aiming to tell a story, like The Black Parade, but to have something that is kind of the opposite of said concept as well as a touching tribute to a previous era is rare still, and I really appreciate that. In terms of the album sound, it's actually fairly similar to Bad Out of Hell 2. Sadly, there is no assistance from Dick Wagner, and so the album is a bit less operatic and such, but it's still really enjoyable. It might have fewer guitar solos, but there is a lot more guitar work this time around, if that makes sense. It's a really good building block between songs, and it's the instrument that probably appears the most. I mean, obviously, yes, there is guitar work, bass work, and drumming, and so on, but it's easily the piano work that shines the brightest here, I feel. And also, huge props to Neverland Crush for the musical contributions to the album, by the way. Whilst the Meatloaf Sidemen studio band did a great job as always, and they always do, same with Neverland, Neverland did it just that bit better on this album, I feel. It was really nice. Standout songs include Original Sin, Not a Dry Eye in the House, If This Is the Last Kiss, The Great Closer and Where Angels Sing, and my favourite in Left in the Dark. Whilst not as grandiose as his previous album, that being Bad 2, Meatloaf turns out another great vocal performance with much more structured storytelling and solid production, so it's another album I can recommend. And that's it for part 2. Join me tomorrow for the third and final part where I'll be covering his last 5 albums from Couldn't Have Said It Better to Braver Than We Are. I'll see you all then, and as always, thank you for listening, you're awesome.